Okay. Well, the goal for tonight really is to expand upon the lesson that we were in last time, which I think has been a few weeks now, about Daniel's 70 weeks. Now, there's some questions. We couldn't quite get into it. We started the lesson even kind of late, so I know that there was a lot of math even, and dates, and just issues, and Dr. Block's going so fast, it's hard to maybe parse through some of that. And I mentioned, at the very end, of course, that I have a different take than Dr. Block, and so, just throw another monkey wrench into the plans there. But I don't mean to make things more complicated than they than they need to be. But what I want to do is present maybe, I think, a way to understand this that makes a little more sense, that shows you the design and plan of God as being very specific, and that as we walk through it, that we see there is a God who has planned and ordained the beginning from the end, that even the dates and times are in his hands, even the rise and fall of nations, as I said earlier, are part of his decree. So what we'll do is kind of walk through this, and hopefully everyone got a handout. If you didn't get one, I'll get that to you. But we're going to kind of walk through this. I'm going to hopefully make it a little bit easier and also skip over stuff that is maybe technical and we don't necessarily need to know. Up on the screen right now, though, are just some significant dates. Still, you don't need to memorize it. There's no test on this. But just to understand some of the key dates that might be of significance as we try to track down this prophecy. Now, I should probably say, first of all, that why does it keep doing that? Let me see. Is there okay, we'll just leave it at that. All right. Historically speaking, you guys have heard the drill that we care about a few dates here in history. One of them, a big one, is 586 BC. It's showing up right. But understand there are events before and after, of course, that are of significance. But this represents really the end of the Jewish kingdom, of any Jewish kingdom. 586, it's Kaputski. Even to this day, they have a nation, but no kingdom. Why? No king. You need a kingdom. You need a king to have a kingdom. We don't worry about necessarily all the other dates, but some names I just want you to be a little bit familiar with are Cyrus, Artaxerxes, and Christ. And this is in this pamphlet right here. All right. Huh?
1 hour.
Yeah. Okay, so going back to Daniel, and if you remember from last time, or if you don't remember, Daniel is praying for the people. He's thinking about a prophecy of Jeremiah the prophet that was coming to pass. So Daniel has access to this. Daniel is alive. This decree is happening, let's see, approximately, let me see here. So Daniel lives during this time primarily. So Jeremiah wrote around the time of the fall. So in this time, this is Jeremiah the prophet, and this is Daniel. Jeremiah is in Judah, and then Daniel is in Babylon, and then Persia, when the Babylonians get conquered by the Persians. But he has access to Jeremiah's prophecies. And he's reading them in Daniel 9, and he is seeing that Jeremiah had decreed 70 years of captivity. And he's looking at his calendar and saying, this is coming up. This is coming up soon. So this gets him thinking about times and nations. He's confessing the sin of Jerusalem because it was because of Jerusalem's sin and Judah's sin that this captivity even came. And as he's having this confession time. And he's not the one that sinned, but he's feeling burdened that they had to go into captivity because of the sins of the Jewish people. He's just laying his heart. He gets a vision. He gets a vision of another 70. This time not of 70 years, but what we are calling 70 weeks. And if you remember, literally the text says 70 sevens. And the way we're understanding that is a 70 times 7, which would equal, this is where the math is coming in, 490. We know by context that this is not 490 minutes, hours, days, months. These are 490 years. And within these 490 years, God is going to wrap up all of his prophetic plans. So Daniel, looking at 70 years for the prophecy about Jerusalem to be fulfilled, where Jerusalem be destroyed and then they'd be brought back into the land. He's having a vision, and God says, I'm going to send you a vision now of another 70 times 7 years for all of the future history of Jerusalem, you could say, and what's going to happen to it. From, again, another building to a destruction, and then to eternal final kingdom. So 490 years are going to be decreed for it. And you can look at that prophecy in Daniel chapter 9, 24 through 27. You can turn there if you want. But we're going to be referring to it essentially anyway throughout the course of this. And there's 6 things that are going to be accomplished during that time. This is in verse 24. God is going to bring transgression to an end. He's going to seal up sin. He's going to make atonement for guilt. And these are kind of negative things. It has to do with sin, right? But then there's a positive also to this 70 times 7. He's going to bring in everlasting righteousness, seal the vision and prophet, and anoint a holy of holies. And those are positive things. Now, the Holy of Holies is a reference to the temple. Okay, that's the inner room. But by implication, if there is a Holy of Holies, that means there's a temple. And by implication, if there's a temple, then there's a Jerusalem for the temple to be in, because the temple can only be in Jerusalem. So this seems to indicate if this is an everlasting righteousness that's coming in, there's an everlasting kingdom that's coming in, and that means that at some point there's a Jerusalem that is going to be rebuilt, and there's going to even be a temple forever in this kingdom. Does that kind of track? So we're talking about future of Jerusalem, the forever future of Jerusalem, because Daniel was thinking about the present fulfillment of prophecy of Jerusalem as given by the prophet Jeremiah. Now, there are, in this prophecy, for these 6 things to happen, a division of these 490, I'm so bad at this, okay. 490 years, or again, these 70 sevens. If you look at verse 25, he says, know therefore and understand that from the going out of the word to restore and build Jerusalem to the coming of an anointed one, a prince, there shall be 7 weeks, or 7 sevens. So there's one period of 7 sevens, which is 49 years, right? And then he says in the next verse, then for 62 weeks, or 62 sevens, it shall be built again with squares and moat, but in a troubled time. So there's now 62 of these sevens, and that equaled, was it 434? What did we say last time? Okay. For a total of 483 years. And then, after the 62 weeks, an anointed one shall be cut off and shall have nothing, and the people of the prince who is to come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. Its end shall come with a flood, and to the end there shall be war, desolations are decreed, and he shall make a strong covenant with many for 1 week. That is to say, 7, which is 7. And then after that, for half a week shall put an end to sacrifice and offering, and on the wing of abomination shall come one who makes desolate. We'll get to that in a second. We'll get to that in a second. But when we add up the 7, the 483, we get our 490. So everyone's sort of tracking. There's 3 sets. There are 3 sets of time periods that we care about. One is 49 years long. One is 483 years long, and one is 7 years long. Do you see that in Daniel 9? There's a 7-week period, a 62-week period, and a 1-week period, where a week is a metaphor for 7 years. Are we tracking, everybody? Now, don't let the math confuse you. It got me real good when I was doing this last week. So, what we saw last time in trying to track this, because we're talking about dates, we're talking about years, we're talking about dates, there's a couple options for how this goes. Okay, is this the right one? Yes, okay. So, no, this is not correct. This one, okay. So there's a lot of suggestions about how to work this issue. Everyone agrees, not everyone, everyone who takes this literally, because there are people who do not take this literally, they are pretty sure that the 7 weeks is future to us, okay? So we have to account for 483 years, right? 69 times 7. Because you have a period of 7 weeks and a period of 62 weeks. That's 69 weeks. 69 weeks is 483 years. You guys following here? Okay. So, okay, let's add these up. Let's try to see where these 483 years fit. Well, this whole thing starts off with a decree that Jerusalem be restored and built. Verse 25. Well, in 538, Cyrus issued a decree. And frankly, though, that was about the temple and not the city. And when you add up when he made that decree in 538 BC, you have 483 years, you get 55 BC. And that doesn't really have any significance to do with Jesus. Now, some say, well, what about Artaxerxes in 458 BC? The time frame is a little bit better, but the decree, it's too late. Or it concerns, again, the temple and not the city. And it says here, verse 25, going out of the word to restore and build Jerusalem. So it's not about the temple per se. And that was 444 BC. So 458 BC is when he made the decree about the temple and not the city. That takes you here. He did give a decree, though, in 444 BC about the city and the walls. But if you do that, you add 483 years, now you get 40 AD, and that's after Christ. And so it doesn't sound right either. Now, what Vlock subscribed to and said last time is that it is this decree of Artaxerxes in 444 BC, but the years are prophetic years and not years as we know them. What's the difference? Well, 360 days in a Jewish year, they say. And so if we use years like this, and you multiply that by 483, in other words, if you count, no, too much math, even for me. Okay, forget it, forget that part. So a 360-day year is shorter than an actual year, right? Our days are 365, right? So essentially, if you multiplied like 5 by 483 to make up the years, you'd actually come up, you would come up short if you use 360, right? So they're saying, you're about 7 years shorter if you use 360 years. Yeah. But the Jewish people, no, you're exactly right. The Jewish people knew how to count that in. They included that. So when, for example, Daniel was looking at the 70-year prophecy of the temple, it was not 70 prophetic years where a year is 360 and you don't account for the leap year or whatever. No, it's like 360. He's doing it the right way, the way we would count an actual year. So if it's that way for the 70 years of the Jerusalem being destroyed and then restored, then it's 483 literal years, not prophetic years that have 360 days. So this seems to be undermined actually by Daniel himself, because Daniel takes it 70 years of Jeremiah's 70 years prophecy for Jerusalem as 70 years the way we would understand. And the Jewish people knew how to account for the extra days that would accrue by having a short year, right? We make it up. Our days are technically, like 365 and a quarter. So what do we do every 4 years? We add 1 day. So if you're short 5 days, because you have 360, then every 6 years, you can add a whole month, right? You can have a leap month. And that's what some cultures do to get it to fix. So there's all kinds of systems people do to make it fit, right? And that's what they're arguing here, is that this is not accounting for that. But Zaspel and I'm arguing, no, Daniel, or God, giving the vision, did account for that. Like, God knows what a year is. He knows it's 365 and a quarter days or whatever, okay? So then now we're looking at something else to make these dates fit. And what Zaspel will say is one of the problems of this analysis here on this, on this measure is everyone always takes the 7 weeks plus the 62 weeks as one unit, effectively just making it 69 weeks and just putting them together. But then why does God delineate? These are separate periods, epochs of time. Why even bother saying there's a 7-week period and there's a 62-week period? It seems like in the text, actually, he even indicates that there's a beginning and an end to each period, that it's defined by something. So for the 7 weeks, there's the going out to restore and build Jerusalem to the coming of an anointed one, a prince. So Zaspel's going to call that like an ad terminus quo, an ad terminus quem. Don't worry about that. Why use Latin when English will do? There's a beginning point and an end point to those 7 sevens. The beginning point is a decree to rebuild Jerusalem. The end point is a prince coming, perhaps to accomplish it. So, what Zaspel is going to argue is actually the 7 sevens begin in 587 BC, when God told Jeremiah that Jerusalem would be rebuilt, and that this period ends in 538, when Cyrus, who is called an anointed one and a prince in Isaiah, makes the decree to end the captivity so they can go back to Jerusalem, right? So these are known dates. The 587 BC and the 538 BC, those are known dates. And you can look in the paper for why we come to know those things. And that equals the 49 years, exactly. Sometimes people, well, anyway, the only hang up there is whether this anointed one, a prince, could refer to Cyrus versus Jesus, or the people of the prince who is to come, that's referred to in verse 26, the Antichrist. So does this anointed one, can that refer to someone else besides Jesus or Satan? Well, yeah, it can. Because again, in Isaiah, which is, we brought that up last week. Let me see, which, I forgot the chapter and verse, and he probably mentions it here. Isaiah 45, okay. So Isaiah 45, I'll just read it for you so you know I'm not making it up. Isaiah 45, and he was a prophet prophesying the destruction of Judah by Babylon. He calls out a man whom he does not know exists yet, who's not king of anything yet. He says, thus says Yahweh to his anointed, to Cyrus, whose right hand I have grasped, to subdue nations before him and to loose the belts of kings and so on. So Cyrus is called an anointed one. So that is the first 7 sevens. It begins with God's word to rebuild Jerusalem through the hand of an anointed one, and ends when that anointed one comes and says, the captivity is over and you may go home to Jerusalem, to Judah. The second group is the 62 sevens. Now, what most people do is, if you're looking at, not most people, what people tend to do is try to work backward. Let's find the end of this period and then work back 62 times 7 years, the 434 years, and work backwards. So they use, the crucifixion is pretty significant in the life of Christ, triumphal entry. So let's use, there's 2 common dates for Jesus' crucifixion, right? 30 AD and 33 AD. Both can work according to the Hebrew calendar of when Passover is and all that. You need to worry about that. But those are 2 legitimate dates to understand or to fix Jesus' crucifixion, resurrection, triumphant entry, all that stuff. If you subtract 434 years from both of those, of course, you get either 405 BC or 402 BC. Does anything significant happen in 402 or 405 BC? Like nothing. Right, this is that timeline. Well, what if we work back from Jesus' baptism, which would be either 408 BC or 405 BC? Remember, Jesus' ministry only lasted 3 years. For sure, it lasted 3 years. So if he ended his ministry in 33 AD, when did he begin it? 30 AD. If he ended his ministry or crucified, rose again in 30 AD, then when did he begin his ministry? 27 AD. So let's subtract, and you get 408 or 405 BC, just 3 years off of both of these dates. Well, did anything happen at those times significant? Nothing. Nothing was going on. The Persian Empire was doing its thing effectively. This is the intertestamental period. There's squabbling and fighting between the Greeks and the Persians, and that's all starting to happen. The Greek Empire is going to rise. But is there anything significant prophetically or otherwise happening? No, nothing. So, what if suggests Zaspel, I'm saying his name right? Yes. Let's begin with a known time. Let's begin with the rebuilding of Jerusalem, because it says, for 62 weeks, it shall be built again with squares and moat, but in a troubled time. So we're talking about the rebuilding of Jerusalem. Let's start with 444, or Nehemiah. If you read the book of Nehemiah, he's cupbearer to Artaxerxes. And he, in 444 BC, he was sad and hearing about what's going on in Jerusalem, and the city's torn down, the walls are all busted, and he's lamenting to Artaxerxes, and he's close to Artaxerxes, the king of Persia. And Artaxerxes, why are you so sad? My city, it's in shambles and ruins. And he's very loyal to the king, but his heart's broken over his people who have returned to Jerusalem, but there's nothing there. And Artaxerxes said, you know what? Go, and you lead a group to rebuild. Get everything that you need and go. And so he goes, and this is where there's a little bit of conjecture. Not conjecture, but we're going to rely on something that's a historical account and not like purely scripture, but we're, for the dating of it. Josephus, who was a Jewish historian at the time of Jesus, said that once he got the okay, Nehemiah went first to Babylon to find volunteers among the Jews to return with him. And then after he got them, he amassed all the supplies, put out all the contracts to rebuild it and for builders to come and help, right? And that apparently this took a few years. And so Josephus says that it was in the 25th year of Artaxerxes that Nehemiah finally made it and stepped foot into Jerusalem and started rebuilding. And if you remember the story of Artaxerxes, when they started rebuilding it, the surrounding people got jealous, and they're like, oh, those Jews are trying to make trouble. And so if you remember the story of how they had to have their workman's tool in one hand and a shield, a sword on the other in case they got attacked. So they're rebuilding, but they're watching their backs. This is what was probably referred to, it shall be built again with squares and moat, but in a troubled time. So it seems to fit that 444 BC might serve as an appropriate time to look at the beginning of the 62 weeks. Well, now then, let's add that 434 years again. You get to 6 BC. Now you might say, what is the significance of 6 BC? what is, it's before Christ. Well, I don't want to get into all the details of how it happened, of that. But again, they missed the mark there and came up with a date for the birth of Christ that was off by a few years. So no one knows the exact year, actually, because there's not many chronological markers of Jesus' birth, except for the reigns of certain governors and stuff, right? And there's a census and Quirinius and all that. And there's a little bit of controversy, but most do agree Jesus was born somewhere 5-6 BC, something like that. Okay, just one of those idiosyncratic things, those random convergences of irony where Jesus is born before Christ somehow. So, any questions about that? I mean, you can dig into the history, but. Okay, so this is a plausible date of the birth of Christ, in which case you have a significant 62 sevens again, where it's from the 62 weeks, but in a troubled time, and after the 62 weeks, an anointed one shall be cut off and have nothing. Now this doesn't say immediately after the 62 weeks, only that the 62 weeks must happen first. So if that 62 weeks marks the time where Jesus is born, of course he needs to be born in order to be crucified. So again, some people have a question about this anointed one in verse 25 being the same anointed one of verse 26. Can they be different anointed ones, or do they both have to be Christ or anything? Well, no, why can't the first one be Cyrus? No reason it can't. Why can't this one be Jesus? After all, they're separated by a number of years, hundreds of years. So it would make more sense if they were different people. And in fact, this passage is presenting 3 different people that are of significance. So Cyrus, a earthly king whom God used, the King of Kings, Jesus, and then the false king of the world, the Antichrist. So those are the 3 main figures. All of them truly, really moving under God's holy purpose and plan, but very distinct, right, in the kind of people they were. Cyrus versus Christ versus the Antichrist. So, to summarize, the 7 and 62 weeks are not just continuously mashed together, but rather there is a beginning point and an end point to each season. From 587, you had an issuing of the word in fulfillment of Daniel 25, the going out of the word to restore and build Jerusalem. That was Jeremiah, the prophet. To restore and rebuild Jerusalem, to the coming of an anointed one, a prince, shall be 7 weeks. Well, the anointed one who gave the decree to restore and build Jerusalem, or to end the Jewish captivity and make it possible for them to return, Cyrus, 49 years, 587 to 538. And then you have a gap, and it says your gap of unspecified duration. He means in the text. We know the exact, difference between these two dates, but he's saying according to the text, it doesn't say that there's a gap or how long a gap it is, only that it does make a distinction between one group of 7 years and this group of 62 years. So there's a gap there. Then you have 440 BC, where Artaxerxes tells Nehemiah, you may go and rebuild, and the building starts in 440 BC until an anointed one shall be cut off and shall have nothing. Or after the 62 weeks, an anointed one shall be cut off and shall have nothing. We have the anointed one, Jesus Christ, being born so that after these 2 weeks, he can be crucified on the cross. So that's exactly 434 years, exactly 49 years, exactly the 7 weeks, exactly the 62 weeks. Is that tracking so far so good? As that's why, as the dates are too exact to be dismissed lightly, and they stand well as a firm apologetic for the divine and supernatural character of the prophecy. Now, what is going to happen after the 62 weeks? The crucifixion of Messiah, the anointed one shall be cut off and shall have nothing, and the people of the prince who is to come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. Its end shall come with a flood, and to the end there shall be war. So the people of the prince who is to come, this is, most take it as the Antichrist. Why? Because it's not Jesus who's destroying the city and the temple. It's the Romans. So most would look at this passage and say that the Antichrist is going to be someone who is of somehow the inheritor or lineage of the Roman Empire. So if you've ever read Left Behind, Nicolae Carpathia, literally a Romanian. It's like, hey, he's got Roman in the name. He's got Roman in the name, right? So anyway, so that's that. So all that's required, you don't need the 69 weeks to add up exactly to this, because this actually happens on my resume. Why is my writing so messy? Okay. All right. This happens in 70 AD anyway, and that's not anywhere in these calculations. It just has to happen after. So the crucifixion, of course, happens after 6 BC. The destruction of Jerusalem happens after 6 BC. The last, and this all represents the last 7 years, the last week that's left. And there is, just like here, a gap of unspecified duration between these 2 weeks, the 7 weeks, and the 62 weeks. We're saying that between the 62 weeks and the last 7 weeks, there is a gap of unspecified duration. We're in it right now. It's been 2,000 years, much longer than the gap that existed before, but a gap nevertheless. We had 2,000 years of this gap until this last 7 weeks. What will happen during that one? If you remember, it begins with a covenant with Israel. He shall make a strong covenant. That is the prince who is to come. The prince who is to come shall make a strong covenant with many, and we understand this to mean the Jews. Why does it have question mark AD? Do we know when this is going to be? No, I mean, could it be, 2025 AD? Maybe, all right? You don't know. Could be 2025 AD. In which case, when would be the end of time be? Or, I'm sorry, the prophetic history of Jerusalem. If it was this year, then we would be done with all this 2032, right? Seven years, okay? No, this is our 100th anniversary.
Yeah, 100th thing, yeah.
God, you have 7 more months if you want us to. If you want to do it on the 100th anniversary of our church.
Don't need a lot.
Yeah, I know. Right? And he says that half of the week, what is half of a week? Half of 7 is 3.5 years. There's going to be what's called the abomination of desolations. He shall put an end to sacrifice and suffering. And then, of course, after the other half of the week, you will have, 2032 AD, and the end. Return of Christ, judgment on that coming prince, etc. So this is still future to us. Now, there's people who will take every single one of those time periods, 69 weeks, 7 weeks, 62 weeks, all of that stuff, and they'll warp them and stretch them to mean all kinds of things. It seems very bizarre to do that. For one thing, why bother with very specific numbers of years and not mean them literally, if they're elastic like that? Because some will say, the past 2,000 years, that is the 7 years. We're waiting, so we're in it. So all the stuff, when you talk about Revelation, you're talking mainly about stuff that happens in the 7 years, right? So what do people who think the past 2,000 years is the 7 years, what do they think? This is the tribulation. And we've just been in it for 2,000 years. They don't take it literally. Revelation seems to take these 7 years very literally too, because it talks about so many months and blah, 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 right? So it seems best to want to take these things literally. It's the way Daniel understood Jeremiah, when Jeremiah said 70 years are decreed for Jerusalem in its captivity. So why not also then Daniel's vision of 70 years? We should take it literally as well. That means that by application, we are understanding God has had this thing planned out very meticulously. The rise and fall of nations, the placing of kings and kingdoms, anointed ones, even the birth and death, of course, of Jesus Christ is all according to his purpose and plan that he is working out. We can trust him. And again, I mentioned, I think last time, that so much of Daniel was assumed to have been written way later than Daniel claims to write it, during the reigns of the Persian kings. It must have been during the time of the Greeks. Actually, since he prophesies about Romans, then he must have written this, or someone, maybe not even Daniel, just some guy calling himself Daniel, must have written this in like the hundreds or 200s BC, somewhere between 200 and 100 BC, when the Romans were on the rise. Because if he's talking about Romans, and you don't believe in miracles, you don't believe in prophecy, he's writing about them after the fact. So this must have been written closer to the time of the Romans, closer to the time of Jesus and Josephus. But then they found the Dead Sea Scrolls. And the Dead Sea Scrolls, dating to before the time of Jesus, lo and behold, contain the book of Daniel. Whole, as it is. No editing, no where this is a living document. No, they just found Daniel for the most part, like word for word, as it is in the Hebrew text. And if they already had it and were spreading it, that means the original authorship was even before that. And now it gets too hard to believe. How could he write about Romans? The Roman people before they were on the scene. I know how. Same God who has planned the beginning from the end. The same one who can tell Jeremiah 70 years of captivity. Same one who put Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in a fiery furnace and rescued them. The same God who ordained the rise and fall of the kings of Judah and Israel. The same God who raised up David. The same God who raised up judges. The same God who saved his people from the Egyptians that we have evidence of. The same God who saved the world, or saved the 8 people in an ark from the destruction of the whole world because of their sin. The same God who made Adam and Eve. And it's all of a piece. It all starts to make more sense together as reality than try to make up the story of why this exists, as a bunch of mishmash of people with different agendas and not inspired by the Holy Spirit, just trying to come up with what? A history of their people where you look bad? Oh, this is truth. This is life. This is reality. This is God. This is his plan to redeem and save us. I'm struck by God's purposes for, let's not forget, why do we care about 490 years? Because this is going to happen. And you know what? This sounds awesome. This sounds fantastic. Bringing transgression to an end, sealing up sin forever, making an atonement for my guilt and shame, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to accomplish the seal, the vision. Prophet means to, like all the things God has said, to make them happen, right? To put them into reality so that all the promises about an eternal kingdom, eternal righteousness is going to be true. You won't need any more promises that the good times are going to come because the good times will be here. So seal them up. And to anoint a holy of holies. And this holy of holies is going to be on earth, this earth. And God is going to dwell among us, sinners, who have been made perfect by the grace of Christ. A world, a universe that has been recreated, restored without the taint of sin. No more disease, no more hunger, no more pain, no more suffering. This sounds great. Fantastic. 490 years. You know what's exciting? 483 of those already done, right? It's like when you tick off the days of Christmas. The day after, you're back at 364 or whatever. Well, we're at 483. Only 7 more years ago, but of course, that's a little bit in jest. We don't know when that's going to kick off, but we believe here at our church, it can happen at any time. The beginning of that 7 years can happen at any time. So really, it's even closer than 7 years in the sense that for us who believe, when Christ comes, we'll be with him, and we'll talk about more about the tribulation, all those things later, what that last 7 years really entails later. But that all sounds very good to me. Worth the wait, certainly. So that means the rapture could happen at any time, right? So, okay, well, let me pray and we'll close. Heavenly Father, I do thank you that you are in control of these things, and we think of all the politics and nations around the world, and at times maybe feel somewhat helpless, and yet to read this and truly understand and embrace it is to say that this is your purview, the rise and fall of nations and all those things. It doesn't mean we don't participate in government or politics or anything like that, only that ultimately we are trusting in you, that you are establishing your purpose and plan for eternity. And so what you have asked us to do very explicitly is to go preach the gospel and make disciples. And that is, in one sense, what this gap is for. It is what's called the time of the Gentiles, which is to say the time of the gospel to go forth into all the corners of the world so that all the creatures under heaven will hear and know there's a God in heaven who loves them, to whom all must give an account. And so we want to be right with you. The only way to be right is through Christ, your Son, who died on the cross and rose again, according to the Scriptures, in full fulfillment of the prophecies, exactly the right time, according to your time. So Lord, help us to trust in that and trust